Regular meeting of the Housing and Redevelopment Authority for the City of Richfield. And first item on the agenda is roll call.
Commissioner Rubenstein,
Here.
Commissioner Gotel, Commissioner Gepner,
Present.
Commissioner Quam,
Here.
Chair Sandal.
Here. Okay, we have before us the approval of minutes of the regular HRA meeting of April 15th, 2013, the special HRA meeting of April 23rd, 2013, and the special HRA City Council Housing Visioning Task Force meeting of May 7th, 2013. Is there a motion to approve?
I so move.
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we have the approval of the agenda before us.
I'll move it.
I'll second it.
Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. And then, Mr. Stark, we have the consent calendar. Do you want to take us through that?
Yes, thank you, Chair Sandal. The consent calendar contains several separate items which are acted upon by the HRA in one motion. Once the consent calendar has been approved, the individual items and recommended actions have also been approved, and no further HRA action is necessary. Any HRA commissioner may request that an item be removed and placed on the regular agenda. Tonight we have 4 items on the consent agenda, and all of those are recommended for approval. Item A is consideration of approval of a resolution authorizing the HRA to affirm the monetary limits on municipal tort liability established by Minnesota statutes. Item B, consideration of approval of a resolution affirming and ratifying submittal of an application to the Minnesota Housing Community Fix-Up Fund Program and Community Home Ownership Impact Fund for a program to write down the interest rate on home improvement loans. Item C, consideration of approval of an amendment to the subordination and satisfaction policy. And finally, item D, consideration of approval of a resolution affirming and ratifying submittal of an application to the Minnesota Housing Community Home Ownership Impact Fund for GAP funds to develop 3 affordable new homes through the HRA's new home program. And that concludes tonight's consent agenda.
Is there a motion for approval of the consent calendar?
I'll move.
I'll second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Okay, we have a public hearing and consideration of a resolution authorizing the sale of 7229 First Avenue to Andrus Customs Homes, Inc. Mr. Stark?
Thank you, Chair Sandal. I'm going to be asking Karen Barton to provide that staff report.
Thank you, Chair Sandal and Commissioners. Andres Custom Homes has submitted an application to purchase the lot at 7229 First Avenue and construct a new home under the Richfield Rediscovered program. The new 2-story home will have 1,926 square feet, 3 bedrooms, 2.5 baths, and an attached 2-stall garage. The home will have an estimated end value of $250,000. Construction would begin once the building permit is approved and would be completed 60 days after the permit is issued. The Housing and Redevelopment Authority purchased this property as a double lot at 7225 First Avenue South in 2012 and divided it into 2 lots. So this is the southern portion of that lot. The appraised value of the lot is $45,000, and the property value when it was acquired was $105,000 for the double lot. There was an existing home on the northern portion of the lot, which has since been raised, and that lot will be sold separately as well. I don't see Mr. Andres here this evening. He was supposed to be here, but if you have any questions of me, I'm happy to answer them.
Okay. Was there anyone who wanted to speak on this public hearing?
I'll move we close the public hearing.
That was quick.
Second.
All right. Any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. That public hearing is closed.
Madam Chair, may I just make a comment? This is another home And I was looking at it and how nice it looks on that, and with 2 lots now, we'll have another possibility of yet another home over there, and this looked very much to scale and looked very nice in the neighborhood. It's really nice to see this, and I encourage people who want to move to Richfield, if you want your own home, there's certainly able to buy a lot at a very reasonable amount, get some assistance from the city, and have a very brand-new home.
I concur. Okay, we need 2 motions here.
I'll read the first motion to approve a resolution authorizing the sale of 7229 First Avenue to Enders Construction Home, Inc.
I second.
Okay, any discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, motion carries. And I didn't get my monitor flipped in time. Were you able to show anything visual up on the screen, Mr. Stark?
I wasn't able to see it either, but
Yeah.
maybe the audience probably. got
Maybe
to see
somebody
that.
saw it, I just missed it, so
Yeah,
that
I
people
couldn't
have
get it
a,
to
yeah,
flip either. Mhm.
This is a speculation home, is it not?
I don't know, I'll have to
No,
ask.
it can't.
I'm not sure if the AV folks, there we go.
There we go.
There we go.
Okay, thank you.
My understanding is these
Mhm.
can't be spec homes.
Okay.
The question
That's
is,
correct.
okay.
That's
There's-
correct.
So there's a
There's an
buyer.
end buyer.
There's a buyer.
There's a
Okay.
buyer.
And this is the front elevation of the house,
Mhm.
and this is the back, so it must be alley loaded.
Mhm.
Yes, I believe this one is.
Mhm.
Okay,
It's
well,
very
thank you,
nice.
that's nice to see. It certainly looks like a very nice house for Richfield. Any further discussion? Comments? Oh, thank you for coming.
So I'll make a second motion to authorize execution of a contract for private development with Andres Custom Homes, Inc. for the development of a single-family home under the Richfield Rediscovered Program.
And I'll,
I'll second that.
okay, it's been moved and seconded. Any discussion? We'd like to come and say hello to you and welcome a new Richfield resident if you'd like to say hi.
Mhm.
And are you Mr. Endres or are you the end buyer?
I'm Mr. Enders, yeah, I'm the builder, and this is the second house that we've
Yes.
built in Richfield now.
We've seen you before here. Thank you.
Yeah, so
All
it's a
right,
nice area.
good, good. We appreciate the good work you do. Thank you.
Oh,
Yes.
thank you.
Mhm.
All right.
Okay.
It's been moved and seconded. Any further discussion? If not, we'll call the question. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed, motion carries. All right. Next item on the agenda is item 5, and I'm going to turn that over to Mr. Stark.
Thank you, Chair Sandel and Commissioners. I'll be presenting this item as well. Back in 2005, the city adopted a master redevelopment plan for the Cedar Point redevelopment area that included development of a higher density residential housing in the 2 blocks known as the Phase 2 housing redevelopment area. The main impetus of the plan was and is to convert single-family land uses and structures that are incompatible with noise generated by the Minneapolis-St. Paul Airport. The Cedar Point Phase 2 housing redevelopment area is bounded by 17th Avenue, which is also known as Richfield Parkway to the east, 16th Avenue to the west, 63rd Street to the north, and 65th Street to the south. The area is currently comprised of 29 single-family residential properties, 14 of which are in the process of being acquired by the city and Housing Redevelopment Authority for the construction of Richfield Parkway. Back on January 28th of this year, staff distributed a request for qualifications to 17 developers for the redevelopment of the Cedar Point 2 area. 3 developers responded to the RFQ, and upon review of their qualifications, they were subsequently sent a request for proposal on April 22nd for the redevelopment of the site. Staff received 1 formal proposal from Sherman Associates for the development of 188 units of senior housing, which includes 120 units of assisted living and 66 units of 55-plus senior living. The development would also include a 6,500 square foot office retail building to be built in a later phase. Staff is requesting direction from the HRA to work with Sherman Associates towards the redevelopment of the Cedar Point Phase 2 housing redevelopment area. A contract for private development agreement would be drafted and presented to the HRA for approval prior to any development occurring on the site. Mr. George Sherman from Sherman Associates is here this evening to answer any questions that you have, and I'm also happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Okay. Was Mr. Sherman interested in doing a presentation for us?
Thank you, Madam Commissioner and Board. I'm George Sherman with Sherman Associates, and we're pleased to be here tonight. We've been interested in working with the City of Richfield for quite some time. As part of our application, we provided quite a bit of information about the background of our company. We are Minneapolis-based real estate owners and developers that have been in business since 1978. And we have specialized predominantly in multifamily housing, both senior market rate rental for sale and affordable housing. We've also been involved in hotel development and commercial development. We are excited about being able to work with the City of Richfield on this particular site. I think we submitted a proposal for this site about 5 years ago, and we're one of 3 proposals at that time, and have been interested since that period of time. With me tonight, we have our development team, including Sherman Associates staff, Brad Goring, who's one of our senior housing specialists, Andy Hughes, who's a project manager. Our architects are Cass Wilson, who specialized in a number of senior housing projects, and our consultant, Denny O'Donnell, who's been with Walker Methodist Senior Housing Facility for quite, development services for quite some time. We are certainly able to go through our proposal with you, and I will turn that over to our staff to, go through both the proposal and the architectural designs. We are a well-funded developer. We are involved throughout this community. I think we have good references for both quality of housing and our ability to finish on development projects. We were recently chosen by the Minneapolis Public Housing Authority to develop a very unique senior housing campus on their properties that provide extended services for memory care along with a healthcare community center, and we certainly would invite any of you to tour it. It's a national model and it's won a number of national awards. We also own and manage about 1,000 units of senior housing. As I mentioned, we are owners. We build for ourselves. We maintain our ownership. We maintain our management, and have a tremendous sense of pride in our ability to deliver and stay with our projects. I'll ask Andy Hughes to talk briefly about the project, and then I'll ask Cass Wilson to talk about the architectural concept of the project.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Chair Sandell, Commissioners of the Board. My name is Andrew Hughes. I'm the project manager for this proposal. I would like to briefly overview the development proposal and then let Link Wilson from Cost Wilson overview the architectural and site plan in more detail. We'll then leave it open for questions you may have regarding the proposal. We would view this as an opportunity to provide your feedback on our proposal, and we're excited to work with you on it as well. As indicated in our RFP response, we propose a 3-phase development consisting of 120 units of senior assisted living, 66 units of senior independent living, and approximately 6,500 square feet of office retail. The assisted living development would include assisted living, independent living, and memory care suites. We are including a significant number of memory care suites. Thank you. A significant number of memory care suites, approximately 40, in response to high demand for this type of housing in Richfield. Together with the independent and assisted living units in this development, it will be able to serve a broad variety of service needs within the community. The independent living community would be affordable to seniors earning 60% or less of the area median income. This would equate to about $40,000 per year for a household of 2. This development would be 55 plus. Sure. This development would be 55 plus and would not have services available on site. We would consider this phase to be earlier in the continuum of housing as compared to the assisted living development. We would include a number of larger units, including 1 bedroom and 1 bedroom plus den and 2 bedroom, which is in response to demand from the market for larger housing spaces as families downsize from single-family homes. Lastly, we would target an office medical type user for the office retail development, such as a medical clinic. We would foresee this being complementary to the senior housing proposed for the balance of the development. We see all three phases as enhancing each other and working together. The buildings themselves will be of very high quality and attractive architecture. They will also serve as an excellent transition between the intense commercial uses to the east and the lower density residential to the west. The buildings would include features that mitigate noise issues from the nearby airport. We are also pleased to mention that we would look to form a partnership with the neighboring Mount Calvary Lutheran Church. We would foresee collaborating on intergenerational activities, shared space, and whatnot. Timing for this development is contingent upon how long it takes to assemble the site and acquire the disparate parcels. But we'd hope to start construction on the assisted living, the first phase, in the summer of 2014. The last thing I would like to mention is that the biggest challenge for us is the site assembly piece of this. We would like to employ a similar strategy as was used at the Penn American redevelopment in Bloomington. There, the developer negotiated purchase agreements and assigned them to the city. The city then acquired the parcels and conveyed them to the developer at the fair market value. We would still need to identify grant sources, but this would help in defraying the holding and assembly costs. At this time, I'd be happy to hand it over to Link of Cost Wilson.
Madam Chair, Commissioners, my name is Link Wilson from Cass Wilson Architects. My partner Colin Cass lives about 100 yards to the west on 4th Avenue. He's still, unfortunately, in downtown Minneapolis right now, so he can't join us. But Colin heads up most of our housing in the office for multifamily, urban living. I head up all of our senior living. So I think it's maybe more appropriate that I'm here this evening. As Andy described the site, and I'm going to just kind of use the mouse to point, even though this is listed as high-density housing, you can see on that site plan that there is a considerable amount of green space, and that green space is really for the entire community to use and is really going to be developed almost as parkland. Now, as you see on the second image, we really tried to take into account the greater context, and obviously at the bottom of this image, if you can see my mouse here, in fact, I'm going to see if there's another little pointer that I can use. We definitely know that we're in the flight path, and I think that even though this building is low scale, residential in feel, it's high enough that I think that it will help some of that ground noise. Now, these are images of Cost Wilson projects that we have been part of in the last just 4 years here in the metropolitan area. Several of them 4-story, 5 stories. The largest, which is in the center, is a 3-story senior living that is very much the scale that we're proposing tonight. And then these are images that were also in your packet, but that we show that park-like feel. This is an image that's essentially the park space between the 66-unit independent building and the 120-unit assisted building to the south. Very residential in feel when you come up to the front door, but I think what I want to emphasize to you tonight is it's not, we've talked a lot about the exteriors, we've talked a lot about the parkland, and that's in the proposal. But I think it's critical for the people who live there. These are all Cost Wilson images and projects that we've finished in the last few years, is what's on the inside. That you walk into a grand lobby. In many ways, we try to design this as the grand lobby that you've always wanted in the mansion that you never could afford to own when you were under age 65 and better. Great dining areas. The assisted building will, and Denny can elaborate on this if you have questions, will serve 3 meals a day. Great outdoor spaces that are not public but that are enclosed by fenced-in areas. This is a property about 2 miles to the west of us here, and we even think of details as gardening for people who may be in a wheelchair or in a walker where they can't bend down like they used to, but they still want to participate in gardening. There's really been a fitness revolution in the senior buildings that we design, very active, very passive, and even rehabilitation. You'll find a lot of folks who live in these buildings who've had an accident. They need to rehabilitate themselves, and there are those spaces within the building. But I think most important about these types of projects is that they do build community. And there's a power to that community as opposed to being lonely in your single-family home, or maybe spouse has passed away. And so a lot of those spaces that we design inside these buildings are trying to foster that community space. Some large community spaces, some small, passive, and also active spaces. And then there's also spaces where you can celebrate your own community that you have participated in all of your life. And then I think the other thing that I want to emphasize is the relationship that we do have with Sherman Associates. I was involved in 1987 in a little Mississippi River development that George headed up, and that relationship has continued. We're actively involved in Rayad Apartments, which is in the bottom left, which will break ground or start. It's an existing building. We don't need to break ground. We've been involved in Bloomington recently with George. We've also done some retail renovation for Sherman Associates, and then in downtown Minneapolis we have a great housing project that's about ready to begin. So I think there's a very strong development relationship here, and I think we offer a very good product to you. So if you have any questions, I think we'll have you ask.
Okay.
Thank you. Happy to answer any questions you have.
Okay. Questions from the commissioners?
Just, Madam Chair, may I?
Yes, please.
I'm very well aware you guys have stellar products here, and the work you do is quite incredible, and it's very nice. And I've only heard good things about the management and those sorts of things. I must say, however, in this site that we're looking at, we had asked for a request for proposals for other things besides what we had seen. This very much looks like what we saw before 5 years ago. Almost exactly. And I was hoping for something a little bit more, and I still thought there might be some kind of a senior piece, especially around memory care. It is increasing tremendously, but we have an overstock of senior housing openings here. And so I would really like to see something like this with the memory care unit there, but something with either a market rate townhome or maybe more retail or something, but still along, because you guys do really great products here. And it would be really nice to see you do it different from Dive than you did from the 5 year ago product.
And if I could respond, or
Please, go ahead.
I was just going to say, what we propose is in response to the market. It's a development that can succeed well in today's market, particularly assisted living. I understand that there are a number of assisted living developments in the city of Richfield, but the memory care, for instance, there's a very, very tight occupancy for that housing type. That said, we did come here today to gather your feedback, so we're happy to make revisions. Particularly the 55-plus independent living. We could look at doing that as a family development, a workforce housing community. That's something we'd be interested in, provided the board was.
We really like personally,
Yeah.
we like a mixed use with affordable in it. We think that that's very respectful to people of lower incomes versus 100% affordable in an area. And so we like to see a mixture of that so all people feel welcome.
Sure. Okay. Doris?
Thank you. I'd like to second what Mayor Gotel had to say. Richfield just went through a process of more than a year regarding the city policies and the city's vision for the kind of community we are and we want to be, as respectful and inclusive of people from many different backgrounds and many different socioeconomic levels. I looked at this, and the phase 2 just struck me as being, this is not what Richfield stands for and what Richfield desires. In addition, back in the last visioning program that Richfield had, I was on the housing visioning committee there, and we definitely said that we do not want any more segregated apartment buildings for seniors. We want to have seniors integrated, independent seniors. We have a plethora of senior buildings here already, and de facto senior buildings here, and it is a segregation. People there feel segregated. The community feels it's a segregation, this is not what Richfield is about. I was very disappointed to see that segment in in your proposal, because I really thought you had been paying attention to what's been going on in Richfield. This has been in the newspaper in a big way, and it was just plain didn't sink in.
In referring specifically to Phase 2 or the entire development as a whole?
No, Phase 2.
Okay, and that's something that we'd be happy to have a look at. I'm hearing that you're wanting more housing choices, a mixed income community, perhaps a family development, is that fair to say?
That would be, I would think that would be something we would like to see.
And maybe a lower intensity of use, you mentioned townhomes, is that?
That would be a
possible.
possibility too. But again, I realize there are price points here that have a problem being whether you could make some of those kinds of things work or whether you can't. I guess we thought there might be a little more retail too. That would be nice. I think the clinic idea is great no matter what, because that side of town just doesn't have enough of that. They mostly have dentists over there and a clinic there, and something, especially if we still did a memory care there, would be very good.
Regarding the retail, we did integrate that 6,500 square foot development on the north end of the site because we felt we were transitioning from density from 66th on.
I understand.
Yeah, and then regarding the cost of new construction, it would be a challenge for us to do a market rate family development for Phase 2 because of the cost of construction and the rents not being necessarily sufficient to support it. We'd like to see $1.50 plus to support new construction, whereas you think we could more likely get $1.30 for that area. And so one thing we would typically look for is the possibility of doing a housing tax credit development for that site, which is what we proposed initially, but it would be oriented towards families. And so if I could get comment on that, clarity, that would be helpful for others.
Was it open or was it only limited to senior housing?
Yeah, I'll just address a few of the things that have come up. One is, it was open. You know, it was focused on housing more than commercial, but it was not prescriptive of whether it was senior housing or affordable housing or those types of things. The reason it was focused on housing was for a number of reasons. One is to provide a transition from the, you know, the retail that's the Target and Home Depot, a transition to the single family to the west. Secondly, when we had the noise studies done in this area in the early 2000s, late 90s, the results of that were that you wanted buildings that had some substance to them, some larger buildings, which by its nature would mean a little higher density. Secondly, you want, if it is going to be residential, you want it interior focused, meaning that most of the units you would enter from a hallway as opposed to the outside, that most of the recreation space and socializing space would be interior rather than exterior decks or patios. And the reason for that is anytime you put an opening on a building, particularly a door, that introduces a conduit for noise to enter that building. And so when you add some of these factors together, multifamily housing made sense, and you know, in some sense, senior housing in particular, because it is more internally focused. You know, when we did meet with the design team a number of times, the development team, and you know, staff may have given them the wrong message, but the message that we gave them, and this has been the staff's philosophy on this for a long time, is that, you know, we weren't going to tell them what the market was. You know, that's when I look around the Twin Cities and see projects that have failed, a lot of times it's because the developer was forced to do something that wasn't in line with the market because that's what the city was pushing. So we encourage them to really delve into the market, to really try to figure out what the market needed here so that it could be the most successful project.
Was there some?
I-
Go ahead, Mr. Gephardt.
Along that line, John, you had a couple other developers who said that they might be interested, but they didn't submit a proposal. Did you get any feedback as to
Why
what their
they didn't
thinking
have
was?
Well, I spoke with one of them. I don't know if Karen spoke with the other. I spoke with
Could you
United,
please tell us who they were?
yeah, United Properties and Dominion. I don't know if it ends in an N or an M. I know that the difficulty of acquiring residential properties and the costs associated with it, when they looked at the, their cost-benefit analysis, what they might be able to get out of this property versus the risk and money that they would put into acquiring the other 13 or 14 single-family homes, that ultimately they made the decision that they didn't want to pursue it.
Yes, Doris. Apropos, one of our guests here today mentioned his association with Walker. I was wondering if any proposals went out to groups such as Walker or Ebenezer or any of those. And do we do anything proactively to encourage these people to work with us? Or we just sit back and wait for them?
The RFQ did go out to the groups that you mentioned, as well as a number of developers that not only focus on senior housing, but on all kinds of residential, multifamily housing. And yes, it was very clear in the request for proposal that we were very much interested in working together with the developer on creating a development that would work in this area and be beneficial to the community.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I just, one of the things is that, we're putting a lot of dollars into redeveloping and putting the parkway in on our own dollars here. And I want to make sure that we get the best out of this, and I know the market has been down, and I know it's been hard for you to pull things together as a market. You're not the only developers had that problem. It's been a tough market for all developers. But it'd be really nice if, I guess if I had a choice, I'd rather wait and see what we could get if that's what it takes, because there's been other approaches too of what we would call less than ideal types of restaurants and stuff like this too, and we know if we wait that will change. And perhaps if we had different iterations or if we waited, we would get something different as well.
Yes, of course, waiting is always an option, and if that's something you want to explore, I do feel that the market for this geographic area is improving,
Yeah.
and that with Richfield Parkway will improve more. The downside of waiting is that the HRA has kind of mortgaged itself in a sense for Richfield Parkway to occur. The HRA has taken on an assessment on the properties fronting Richfield Parkway. The longer that sits out there, the greater the likelihood that the HRA would have to absorb some of those costs, and absorbing those costs means taking funding away from our programs. I don't think that we're in any kind of panic mode. I think that's still 2-3 years down the road. On the other hand, even if tonight we said we're going to marshal forward with this development, sometimes these processes, in the best of occurrences, take some time.
Understand.
Mr. Quam?
I have several thoughts about this. I don't have any constraints in my thinking about, or concerns in my thinking about the design or the quality of the developer at all. I do understand why it's coming in with senior housing. And I do understand that there'll continue to be a market for that, and that it's more likely to be easy to finance it than some of the other things we've been talking about. I even think that it's a fairly good location for senior housing with the activity around it, which seniors do like, and the easy access to retail and all of that sort of thing, and even potentially being able to look out their windows at some kids in a playground. So I may be a little bit lukewarm also about adding additional senior housing, but I'm not adamantly opposed to it either. I just have a couple technical questions, and they relate to, well, first, one's kind of a policy question. My understanding is that our housing task force is supposed to come out with a report in June, is that right? And it'd be nice to know that this was consistent with what they're recommending.
Yes, that's correct. I believe that on June 25th, they're going to be making their presentation to the city council, and you're going to be invited to hear that as well. A couple of thoughts on that. One is, at the beginning of that process with them, we were also having the discussion with you about Richfield Parkway and the assessment. And so I had told the group, the visioning group, that there were some time constraints on this particular development, and it was possible that this site could be moving forward faster than their vision, and I think they understood that. Secondly, I haven't heard anything. I've been in all the visioning meetings, and I haven't heard anything that would lead me to believe that there's some concern here. They have voiced a lot of the same things that you folks are voicing, and that is a desire for as much diversity in housing projects as possible. So diversity in terms of incomes, diversity in terms of age-restricted and non-age restricted together. So I do think that if I don't want to speak for the Housing Visioning Task Force, but based on what I've heard from them, that their preference would be to maybe see more diversity in that nature.
Thank you.
But, sorry, let me add to that, though. I think when you are talking about alternatives, what I thought I heard from the development team was, one alternative would be to look at non-age restricted housing with tax credits. I just want to make sure you understand that based on my experience, non-age restricted housing with tax credits is typically 100% affordable. That's what the MHFA has been approving. And I think if you were to ask the Housing Visioning Task Force, would you rather see a 100% senior project there or a 100% affordable project there? I think that it would be overwhelmingly tipped towards senior, and not that those are the only two choices, but.
I assume you've informed the developer of a little bit of the history with the tax credit and the 100% affordable. And
Yeah,
if you
and
haven't, I'd recommend that they ask you about it.
I think every developer in the
yeah.
Twin Cities probably kind of kept an eye on that project.
The other questions I had, just kind of related to the financing. You talk about having a ground lease along with TIF, which I haven't seen happen before, and I'm just wondering how that works. And then the other is, there are these GAP grant applications that are in the financing. And I know that in past cases, we've had grant applications and we've had the property sitting pending for a couple of years, and then the grants haven't come through.
Yeah.
And how likely is that? How do these relate to the kind of grants that we've seen in the past that couldn't be obtained?
I'm just going to talk briefly a little bit about the issue of townhomes versus multifamily housing. And I do recall a conversation almost 6 years ago when we first applied for this project, that we had an extensive meeting with the Airport Commission and their concerns about sound. And I think it was going to be fairly difficult to do townhome development on this site, given their concerns about outdoor play area, sound, and number of doors and openings. And I think they were really trying to convince the city and developers to look at ways to do more slightly larger buildings, multifamily, where there was less outdoor openings, outdoor areas, because of their concerns about sound. And I think that will probably come back in any final design constraints on the site, that you're probably going to, whether it be senior or non-senior, you're probably going to end up having to look at either retail, which you mentioned, or or some types of multifamily housing projects. We do think that there is a strong demand for the memory care and assisted care on this particular east end of Richfield. The market shows an extensive amount of demand for that. On the issue of whether it's senior or alternative types of housing for the second phase, I think we're willing to look at that. But I think as you said, as we mentioned, the strength of the market does not yet support market rate rental housing, and I think you also will have a significant amount of constraints on the property as far as both sound attenuation and outdoor space. So I think the design, again, will come into impact whether that second phase project is truly a market rate or has some type of, offset to market rate. I don't think you necessarily have to be 100% affordable if you do a non-age restricted project, but I think you're going to have to probably be up there in a higher percentage than 60 or 70% to meet the different guidelines. A number of sources of funds that we've identified and are available for this project are targeted for projects that meet certain affordability requirements. They're not all. They do not have to be 100% affordable, but many of the Met Council funds, the state economic development funds, the cleanup funds, and MHFA funds that are available for housing do require certain levels of affordability, but it doesn't necessarily require 100% affordability. I do think that there is a demand for housing. I think you could do slightly more retail, but I don't think you're going to be able to do a huge, it does not have a major retail presence to it. You can certainly expand that 6,000 square feet slightly more. I think if you do too much retail, it will probably struggle unless it's a big box like across the street. Yes.
Dolores?
When I was thinking about the retail, I recently have had quite a few opportunities to go into Village Shores. And I was surprised to see how much retail is on the inside that isn't really visible from the street. There's a beauty salon and some other services that really focus on the residents in that building. And that's really where this additional kinds of retail, I believe, would really be more successful. It's not so much, yes, the doctor thing is really good, but other kinds of things that are really focused on the residents in that area and perhaps even the people who work across the street for services that are not available across the street, that are more mom and pop kinds of businesses.
Okay, if I can ask, the Phase 1, 120 units of assisted living, is the assisted living also going to be including, is that the memory care place as well?
That will be within
Within the
the
units.
40 units will be within the 120.
Okay, because that is a different kind of housing, and certainly there is a need for it, that I know. I'm an elder law attorney, and
I mean, we can certainly look at alternatives to phase 2. I just would, the staff have indicated, and we would indicate that you're going to probably get between, you're going to have to address some design elements, some sound issues, and just different in the rent of that project to try and, get it to work, given the constraints on the site. But we do all kinds of housing, and we simply did look at the market study here, and we felt that there was still enough demand for senior. If the community wanted us to look at different types of non-age restricted housing for that, we would certainly look into it. We would like very much to do the assisted care. We think there's a demand for that. We do think there's a demand for the senior, but we could certainly look at an alternative to the senior, to the age restricted.
May I just make a comment about, we just had an apartment building with some affordable units up on Lindale. You're probably very familiar with that, and it rented out very, very quickly. And those were not low rents. So I think that you might find that the market seems to be there for some really nice apartments. And one of the things I've heard about Richfield is that, first of all, we don't have enough, we have apartments, but we don't have the nicer, newer apartments that have the dishwashers and the dryers and all those kinds of things inside them. And those just went like hotcakes. So, we don't have a lot of that. Most of our apartments here, we have an overabundance of one bedrooms. And even, on market rate, I think there's certainly seems to be an awful lot of people. A lot of people like coming down through South Minneapolis to that Target and Home Depot. That Target's actually one of the highest performing stores in the region. I just talked to the Target folks there. So I mean, the traffic is substantial there. So even whatever retail did go in there gets great traffic there too. It's quite phenomenal. So I would definitely want to see something else move besides senior housing here. I wouldn't mind a memory care unit there. I think it's needed. I agree with Chair Sandal. There's not enough of that, but we have a lot of open senior housing here.
just, and why we can certainly look at phase two, I just, the general rule, and I can have the architect talk about this also, but in market rate apartments right now, because we're building quite a few of them, and they are, going up, the tower cranes are everywhere around the Twin Cities at market rate. You're probably looking at somewhere around $2.25 to $2.50 a square foot for a market rate wood frame apartment building. That would put a one-bedroom rent somewhere around $1,500 and a two-bedroom rent somewhere around $2,500. That rent is probably low high for this area, but there are ranges between, very affordable and market rate that you can strive for. But when people look at true market rate in the Twin Cities for what it takes to build brand new housing, wood frame, you could very well be looking at somewhere between $1,500 for one bedroom and $2,500 for
Well, our
two-bedroom.
friends up on Lindale did it for
Yeah,
less.
Well, I think there may have been some affordable in that helped bring.
There's
I'm
only
just
a
saying
few-
there are
there's a few.
ranges.
There's
I'm
a
just
few
saying,
one-bedrooms, yeah.
yeah, I think there are ranges within that spectrum
But there's,
between
they were
very
20% affordable.
Yeah, they're 20,
Yeah.
yeah, but the ones that were affordable, yeah.
I think there are ranges within that you can strive for, but I think true, and I think the market rate in this area is probably that $1.35 to $1.50 is what's supportable. But there are probably tools to get to that range.
Okay. I guess the other thing I would say is I'm somewhat like Mr. Quam. I think I'm not concerned about you're doing a good job.
Yeah, me either.
I officed on
Agreed.
Lake Street when the Midtown was going in and was very impressed. So I have no qualms about your ability to go forward and do good work. I'm less than super excited about more senior units in Richfield. We have somewhat of a reputation of being senior high-rise community. On the other hand, I certainly don't want the HRA to get stuck with costs of going forward with our parkway and not having something at some point in the near future coming into play. So I'm open to hearing maybe some alternatives, particularly for phase two possibly. I would certainly consider it if that's the only thing that works financially. So, go ahead.
Should we perhaps be considering, if Mr. Sherman and his associates were amenable to this, doing part of their project and searching for another developer to do another kind of project somewhere along Richfield Parkway that would, take up the space and make the most of the space, that in a way that would be more consistent with our vision. I don't know if it's all or nothing.
I think that's somewhat up to the staff too. I think they were attempting to try to find a plan that could acquire the balance of the site and not leave half of it acquired and not half acquired, which I think would present other types of issues. I think the thought was a development plan that could come to the table with enough money to buy the rest of the homes at one time versus leaving them partially bought and some of them not bought. But we could look at that. I think we could also look at the other model of, what to do with the other senior building as to whether part of that could be non-age restricted.
Chair.
Yes, go ahead.
I raised the issue of doing TIF with the ground lease and also the issue of assurances as to whether or not the gaps could be filled by the grant applications. I wonder if you could just address those two issues for us.
Regarding the ground lease and the TIF, we have not done a proposal with TIF and a ground lease before, so it's a good comment. We put the ground lease out there as a creative strategy to try to get beyond the big gap issue. Our first preference would be to work with the HRA to acquire the properties in the interim and sell them to the developer at fair market value. Regarding the gap sources, you're correct that we're going to have to go after a number of sources. That's particularly tied to the second phase where there's a larger funding gap. But the first phase is particularly strong, and we feel that with a good Met Council application, we could apply this fall and perhaps, be awarded later that year. And so it's a fair point, though.
Thank you.
But I agree with you on the grants issues. I'm concerned. We have seen that happen in 2 years in a row and seen that failed and that they didn't get anything and we tied up property. We would be in the same position with a contract with them than we are with letting it wait and look for other prospects as well, because it'd still be a huge delay.
Okay, Mr. Geffner, did you have any thoughts on this?
I'm disappointed that we didn't have several to choose from. So that maybe yours could have been the best, and then we would have chose yours. This is a dilemma where we like to see something go in there. You know, we have some preferences as to what we want. We're not seeing this being exactly that. And maybe it can be adapted to something that would be palatable for us. John, if you heard from any of the homeowners on 16th Avenue who might be getting anxious, or is there any pressure there?
I haven't. I don't know if Karen has.
I've heard from one of the homeowners over there, and they were just wondering when they could expect an offer.
Okay.
The parkway's going in this season?
No. My understanding, and I'd want to check this with our transportation folks, the acquisitions will all be completed this season, and they'll do some prep work, but I believe that the actual construction would start next spring. And, you know, the plans for Richfield Parkway are being refined all the time. I don't know how many discussions we've had with the development team about just how tremendous we think that parkway is going to be and what an asset
Exactly.
we think it's going to be. And so I do want to have some more conversations with them about the parkway and what it represents, and that might change their thinking a little bit. You know, I wish we had more proposers too. We did put a lot of effort into getting people involved. We did talk with a lot of folks on the phone, in addition to the ones that actually did the RFP. You know, the issues right now, financing tends to be right now more of an issue
Still difficult.
than the market. The things that are the most easily financed are senior housing and tax credit or affordable housing. And we told several developers that we thought that there was no appetite for a 100% affordable project. And that was the last we heard from several of those, because that's what their business is right now, because that's what the financing is. So even if a market study were to say that there's a market for something else, certainly it's possible to finance other things. It's just more difficult. You know, one thing we could look at, and I think one of the things I'm hearing from the development team is, you know, maybe we can, as a group, get back around the table and talk a little bit more, see what can be refined. And they're right. This is the whole reason we have these discussions with you, is to hear this feedback and to affect the plans from that feedback. So, you know, coming back to you with an alternative to what you've seen tonight, you know, the other alternative on our end, I think, is, you know, to go back and look at the way redevelopment used to occur, that we would bond to acquire the other homes. We would acquire those. We have then all of the control. We have the vacant land, the X number of acres of vacant land, and it makes it a little easier for us to go out and market that. The flip side is we take all the risk, and in, you know, this case, we're asking the developer to shoulder some of the risk as well. So those are the trade-offs.
I guess I would comment the same thing, and I encourage you to discuss the new parkway, because what that will do is connect across the Bloomington Avenue Bridge into Minneapolis, connect to the ground rounds that go all over Minneapolis. It will eventually get south into Bloomington, across the new bridge once Bloomington can fund it, into Egan. And if you haven't seen it, drive along 76th Street East and West in Richfield and check out the new bike trail. It will connect to that bike trail as well, which then connects into Edina, which will get you to Hopkins. So,
Well, we have the new BRT line going up Cedar now as well.
yeah. And so, absolutely, that's true. So, I mean, I think things are happening. It's been slow for us on that far side, but I think there's a lot of positives going in that maybe you will attract. Maybe it's possible, I don't know, to find more of a mixed housing possibility that would attract, that's not age restricted. one of the things we've seen is that we have had people who've bought lots along the new bikeway on South Richfield. And literally, they bought the lot because it was next to to the new parkway and bicycle routes. So, and certainly the BRT and the LRT in Minneapolis has made development along those corridors, and the BRT will be starting
Madam,
shortly.
I just want to iterate too, I have seen a lot of Sherman Associates products, and I think they're excellent products. I think you guys do really good work. I just think our visions are a little bit different for this particular parcel. But I think you're definitely a wonderful developer and easy to work with from what I've heard from other cities. So, and we mayors and people trade anecdotal stories as well. So we know who the really great people are, and we appreciate this. I would like you to see you come back too, and I'm wondering if, Madam Chair, if I could just say that we could postpone a decision on this and move it to another time so that they have the opportunity to come back to us, rather than making a direct motion.
We're expected to get the report at the end of the month, by the 25th, from the housing visioning.
Yes, that's
Mhm.
I'm almost certain that's the case.
Okay. So I don't know what this does in terms of if we, our next meeting isn't until July, what's our date? 15th? July 15th. Perhaps you and staff can talk a little bit more about what other possibilities might be, whether they're financially feasible or not. I mean, we just need to know. And by then, we'll have our housing visioning task force report, which may be of interest to you. It certainly will be of interest to us. If we're not going to make a decision today.
I would like to give Sherman another chance, because I think they're really a great developer.
Yeah, no, I'm not saying they wouldn't have a chance. I'm
No.
just saying,
I think we
Yeah,
would be
then-
willing to work with staff on what we could do with the second building. I have to, I don't want to overpromise right now, given the economics of it, but I think we
Sure,
would.
understand.
We clearly would like to do work in Richfield. We think we do quality work. I think there's alternatives to a pure senior building on that site. We actually, were directed more because of the market study that we got, along with the sound issues. But I think there are alternatives where we could maybe look at some type of a more, market rate apartment building, on that site, and how we can maybe deal with the retail space.
the one high-rise we have on Lindale and 66th Street that's not a senior building is the City Bella right on the corner.
Yep.
And that one's been very successful,
Yeah.
so.
Well, we know there's a tremendous work demand around the airport and around the Mall of America for, non-age restricted housing. The projects we have are 100% occupied around the airport and around the Mall of America because of you're going to be looking at another, several thousand jobs that are going to be
Exactly,
created
there's a lot of expansion.
with the mall expansion, and the airport's not going anywhere, and they continue to have tremendous employment needs. So we know there's a job market, there's a basis for strong non-senior employment around the airport and the Mall of America. And that's really where your market probably comes from, other than other retailers. But I'm guessing 50% of the job employment around this area comes from, the Mall of America or the airport or some other local businesses that you can identify, but it's probably within a mile and a half of this site. It's most of your job employment for this site.
Madam Chair.
Yes, Mr. Getman?
If you couple that too, you're across, this site is across from a park. That park is going to be improved and expanded upon, thanks to the funds from the Watershed District and another group entities. It's on a parkway and it's right next to Highway 77, which gives it real good access. So that, I think it's that thinking that makes us believe that we could get something better on this site.
Madam Chair.
Yes.
And one thing, just to reiterate, I think that there'd be a unanimous view on that with the HRA, is that we do like to have some affordable included in anything, including market rate, like a
Yes.
20%. We kind of strive for that, so it's just a tool that might fit into your thinking.
If there was, not committing to it, but if there was a project that was 80 or 90 units of non-age restricted housing that was 20% affordable and a assisted care component. Would that be something that would be acceptable?
I'd like to look
Yeah,
at it.
I think so.
I think I'd like to look
Not
at that.
excessive.
Um,
I'm sure you'd realize there'd be architectural and marketing issues
There are,
involved
so
in the
that's
way
why I
that
have
you'd,
to.
and the way that you'd put those two together so you could sell one and then sell the other.
You know, I just look at this also as terms of, in our recent experience with community acceptance of projects, that we really want to be respectful of what the community considers as being, this is right for Richfield. We're pretty representative of our community, but there are concerns that Richfield has a personality and wants to retain that personality, and high density is a problem because of our history as a single-family community. But more and more, as we see successful higher density projects, the community becomes more accepting of them as long as it fits other criteria. What's going to be going in housing-wise on the Lindale Garden site is going to be medium density there as well. And this is being accepted with the community with just, you know.
And it's got affordable component to it
It's
as
got
well.
an affordable
and
component
market
to it,
rate.
too. The community's wild about it.
Yeah.
They came here to this community and didn't tell anybody what they're doing. They asked the community, what do you want first? It was a very, very long and iterative process.
But
Let's
successful.
put it that way. But we got a lot of community buy-in and therefore community acceptance of the project.
Mr. Stark?
Just to set some expectations, I can't hear about, proposals without thinking, okay, how's this going to get financed? How's that going to get financed? And in my opinion, one of the most likely tools to finance something like you're discussing is a housing TIF district. Both the Lindale Garden Center site and the Lindale Plaza were both housing TIF districts. And just to remind you, my memory is that the requirement there is that it either be 20% of the units be very low income, so 20% at something like 50% of the area median income, or 40% at a more moderate income. So either 20% at very low income or 40% at more of a moderate income. So I just want to put that out there, just as a reminder.
I guess the other question you raised, Mr. Stark, was whether it's feasibly possible and whether it's something the city and or the HRA would be able to do in terms of looking at acquiring the other 16 homes, whether any of that's a possibility on our part, and how would we finance it, and
Yeah, every one of these projects, these projects get more and more and more difficult every year. And every developer, because of that, and I'm not faulting Sherman or anybody, it's just the way it is. Because of that, every developer is asking the city or the HRA to take a little more risk, a little more risk, a little more risk on your part. And at some point in time, the amount of risk gets a little bit out of kilter with the amount of control you have. And, if you're taking all the risk on behalf of a developer, which I don't think they're proposing, but if that were the case, you might as well do the project yourself.
Correct.
okay. Any other comments to share with
Thank
Mr.
you for
Sherman
coming.
and company?
It's good. It's good to see you here
All
again.
right. We appreciate you coming, and we look forward to continuing discussions.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
Is it my understanding that we don't need to make any motion on this then? Just
Continue it.
continue it? Is that what we're doing?
A need.
It says to direct staff to work with Sherman Associates.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
And you're assuming they will. Okay.
Thanks.
Thanks.
Number 6, HRA discussion items.
Madam Chair?
Yes.
It's continuing our conversation about some of our really great apartment buildings up there in the Lindale Plaza. I have had communications with several of the homeowners behind that building, And and staff has been so great. Thank you for working with a couple of those owners and making some concessions for them so that they're doing better and happier. But quite frankly, when I looked at that and I saw this myself and I voted for this project too, the way it was, I didn't realize we were actually literally cutting off the daylight out of those people's backyards entirely. And it is highly, highly impactful. And I realize that there is such a need for buffer between those kinds of things. And I felt I let some of those residents down by not making that happen or making sure that those homes were going to be purchased or something in the redevelopment of those parcels. And I'm just wondering if the HRA could consider if those houses go up, doing something different about that as in a purchase or something to alleviate that. Those are really impacted homes.
I'm sorry,
And
what are you asking?
About the HRA considering purchasing there's about 4 homes that are highly impacted behind the Lindell Plaza at some point in time as they come available to purchase them and do something else with them. They are highly impacted because of that. They literally would cut off their daylight. One house, she has cardboard in her windows because of some of the lights that are still shining in. She can't sleep at night.
So is it lighting or no lighting?
It is because of the lighting that's there currently on one
Parking
corner.
lot lighting?
It's a light out, and I've talked to staff already about it. It was grandfathered in. Then the next house over I looked at their backyards, and they've called me over, and I visited with some of the neighbors about how their houses are highly impacted, and that even when they had the retail back there, at least they had daylight and sun come in their backyard. They have nothing now, nothing. It is so, the building's so tall, and the way it's impacted, it really darkened their whole yards and everything. It encroached quite significantly, and it's something that I think it's kind of one of these things where we live and learn a lot. But I just wanted to bring this up to the attention of the HRA, and if there's ways in the future to do, first of all, not to repeat this, but second of all, if there's a way at some point to acquire those homes to do something better with them. Just open for discussion.
Okay, I guess I'd want to have more information.
And I think we should if we move forward on that, but I think we could. We could certainly look at that. It's not hard to drive behind there and go look, knock on a couple of those doors and talk to the neighbors.
Madam Chair,
Yes.
it is difficult to buffer half a block. I mean, which is something worthwhile keeping in mind when we look at the Cedar corridor development, because if you do it with the whole block, then you've got a street in between, and you can use some kind of development that is appropriate across the street.
You have some setback.
Yeah.
You have setback, and you can also tear buildings down toward, make them higher toward the front, and there's lots of really great things you can do.
I would say that if we were to acquire the 4 houses, there might be some way to do some medium density or something in there that would operate as a better transition to the neighborhood. And it wouldn't, in my view, be a particularly inappropriate use when it's that close to Lindale.
Okay, I guess we'd have to look at it.
Having lived on 65th Street, when Village Shores was being built and when Woodlike Point was being built, there was supposed to have been setbacks there that wouldn't have blocked the light from the apartments that were right on 65th Street. But somebody, I don't know who was running the city department, that checked on those things back in 1986 or so when those buildings went up. The setback was not respected. And those people, I moved out at that time, lost all their light. So that's really, really important that if indeed a developer agrees to a setback, that the city really, has its inspectors out there at every stage to make sure that it's being done. You can't tear down an 8-story building after it's been built because they didn't do a 30-foot setback.
Okay, anything else on our discussion list?
I encouraged us to go out and physically see some of the things that we were involved in, and talked about a previous tour that was part of a planning commission. So we looked at Richfield Rediscovered and houses and some of the other things, and we were showing pictures of, here was the house before, and look at the house now, and they're integrated pretty well into Richfield, so you don't even realize or know that they're there. But they were pointed out to us, and it made those of us that were involved in planning prouder Richfield citizens, and gave us an understanding of the benefit of that program. And I had encouraged this group in the past to organize something like that, and I would like to make that pitch again, and it's summer months, and some of us are willing to even do that on bikes, which would be good for our health, as well as our minds in seeing some of this stuff. So I would leave it up to you, Madam Chair, to see if something like that would be aligned with your thinking, and maybe we can make it happen.
I think that's a great idea.
I do too.
I think that would be good.
And I don't want to just make this a disconnect. This is just one project where I think we could have done something better, because there's so many things that we've done so well here. And we've had so many wonderful successes, but I think we have to be mindful of the things that didn't quite go as well as we could have hoped.
Okay, so I think we're hearing a request from the HRA to do some kind of a tour looking at development sites. We might want to include the Cedar Point
Yeah.
as
Why
well, to
wouldn't?
give us some thoughts.
Yeah, I just learned the other day that of a couple stores
Noodles
that
just,
have
I just.
moved in
yeah,
there recently.
Noodles.
Surprise.
Yeah, Fannie Mae chocolates.
Yeah, what a surprise.
Oh, it's great.
It's a good
Ready
thing I
for it.
didn't know that one.
Saw you guys there at the noodles, the new noodles. They
Okay.
have gluten-free noodles.
Would we want to do this prior to a regular meeting or on a different date, or what's the thought of the group?
I'm open to just about anything.
Yeah. I would just, right before this meeting, though, I usually have an advisory board of health, except through the summer. So if we get it in the summer, I'd be fine and do it right before this.
Conflicted on the third Monday.
Okay,
Uh,
so then we should pick a different date, and maybe
Okay.
we can organize it. And there may be other things that staff would like us to look at that may be coming down the pike that you're aware of.
Well, and if it's on a different date, maybe we can combine it with another group.
I
the
was just
HRA
going to say
and
that.
Planning
Yeah.
commission or something?
Either planning commission or
Yeah.
whoever.
Yeah,
Mhm.
kill
Oh, that would be
several
great.
birds with one stone.
All right, that sounds like a good plan. So we will ask staff to organize that.
I'm seeing enthusiasm.
Yeah, they're
Nodding
jumping
heads.
up and down, yes. They have nothing else to do with their time, we know.
Right.
Yeah,
But we enjoyed their company so much. We really do.
okay. Executive Director report?
Well, I will give this report in light of the last conversation, and this is primarily focused on Commissioner Gepner. Last week was National Bike to Work Week, and I can tell you that there are about 5 or 6 employees that are primarily paid by the HRA. From those 5 or 6 employees, there was 100% participation in Bike to
Wow.
Work Week. The other 225 employees with the organization that aren't funded by the HRA, there's probably maybe like a 2% participation rate. So we're doing what we can.
Now, was this every day or one day out of the week, or how did that work?
There was 100% of people did at least once.
That was good,
So
yeah.
I think a couple of people did every day.
Good
It was
for them.
there was one really stormy day, so I think
Yeah.
that day didn't get a lot of participation.
And
So-
Madam Chair, you'll probably hear about this from your Commuter Connection staff,
Mhm.
in that they were very pleased and proud and look forward to it to be even bigger and better next year.
It was a lot of fun. So we did a lot of activities related to Bike to Work Week. Otherwise, again, we'll get you a memo about the Housing Visioning Task Force. I'm 99% certain that it is June 25th council meeting that they are going to be presenting their findings. And it was, I think it's been just a tremendous group. It's one of the best, it is the best task force I've ever worked with. And they really were very focused. And it was just it was a good group of people, people that were really committed to the community. And, I would compliment you on the job that you did in selecting the participants.
Are we doing anything to thank them? Anything formal?
We'll
Or
be happy
just
to-
sending them letters thanking them for their service?
Well, let's let them present their report first.
Oh,
I want to treat them like we do everybody else, but yes, and it would
Was
be
there any
nice just to
attrition?
say thank you.
I have one comment on claims and payroll when we get there, but otherwise, that's it.
John, was there any attrition among the individuals that we selected to be part of that task force?
Yes, we selected 18 people, and in the end, there were 3 people just trickled off, and 15 people participated
good.
That's
all
not
the way
bad.
through.
Yeah.
That's not bad considering that they had to come twice a month and the
Mhm.
tour and everything, yeah.
Okay, super. Claims and payroll, then you have a comment on it?
Yeah, I had word that a commissioner had questions about how we choose our lawn care company. Right now, Less Worry, you'll see a lot of Less Worry on the
Yeah.
claims and payroll. It was an active grass growing month. And how we choose our lawn care folks is that every other year, we solicit quotes, and then whoever's the lowest, gives us the lowest quote, we ask them to keep that quote for a 2-year period. And we do also compare that to what it would cost to have our own staff do it. And Less Worry has been doing it for at least 10 years now. They've consistently been the low bidder, and they do a very good job.
I have just one comment. I was going to report this to somebody, but since the topic has come up, 75, I think it's 36, excuse me, the even side of the street on DuPont. It's a lot for sale by the city, and the grass is high.
Mm.
It's in fact going to seed, and it's fairly tall. But I understand, it's been raining a lot of
Yeah.
late.
Yeah. I'll move claims and payroll.
Second?
And we actually have 2 of them, I think, didn't we, that went by?
Yes,
You
I'll
just
move
moved
them
them
both.
Okay. Is there any
I seconded the
discussion?
vote.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
Thank you.
And we have nothing else on our agenda. Our next meeting, you stated, was July 15th. Okay, thank you very much. Meeting is
Yeah.
adjourned.